as we know, there's a massive amount of fraud in this country. You have, for example, foreign fraud rings. These are foreign nationals who come into the United States. They use fake Social Security numbers. They use fake identities to steal billions in taxpayer benefits. There's no way to know until DOGE gains full access exactly how much money we're talking about. But over a 10-year normal budget window, you could be talking about saving over $1 trillion by clamping down on massive fraud in our tax and entitlement systems, including, again, those carried out by organized fraud and theft rings. A very important point in all this is to understand that DOGE are subordinate staffers of the federal government. They are political appointees, just like me, just like everyone else in the White House, that serve and answer to the president. So we're not talking about an outside private entity. We're talking about the existing federal staff of the federal government performing their statutory and constitutional duty.
All right. So, of course, the opposition is raising concerns that, they're getting access to this IRS data. They're going to be looking into the private records of taxpayers across the country. Can you give assurances to people who faithfully pay their taxes in this country that DOGE isn't just going to go randomly sifting through the records and maybe come across the personal private records of a lot of Americans?
I can give absolute 100% assurance. I give you complete and total assurance on that point. We are talking about performing a basic anti-fraud review to ensure that people are not engaging in large-scale theft of federal taxpayer benefits. I mean, for example, we pay billions of dollars a year in child tax credit payments to illegal aliens. Billions with a B. So these are systematic, programmatic reforms that we're talking about here. And as far as protecting the secrecy of tax records, the IRS has been weaponized at the career level against the American people for years now. This has been one of the most invasive arms of the federal government, engaging in capricious and politically based audits, leaking taxpayer information for political reasons. We are restoring the neutrality. We are restoring ethics. We are restoring security controls at IRS. In fact, one of the big projects that DOGE is going to be working on is upgrading IT systems and software so that our taxpayer information cannot be stolen by criminals or foreign governments.
So, Stephen, so just when it comes to, maybe we're getting a little too in the weeds here, but I think you have to. When you look at the Integrated Data Retrieval System, the IDRS, I guess this is where some red flags are going up about access to that personal information. This would give the tax agency employees access to IRS accounts, and certainly you can correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't they then have access to personal identification numbers and bank information?
No. What we're talking about is at the programmatic level, being able to analyze and assess for signs and symptoms of fraud that would involve established criminal organizations and established fraud rings, and looking at how IT systems are failing to detect and interdict this fraud. Again, if you were to just eliminate fraud alone in our tax and entitlement systems, you're talking about trillions of dollars in long-term savings. We need to protect the integrity of these systems that Americans rely on. Right now, the federal government doesn't even catch a tiny fraction of the criminal fraud that takes place, that is ripping off and abusing American taxpayers. And the notion that we would trust the same bureaucracy that has overseen this endemic fraud, waste, corruption, and abuse for decades without installing basic political controls on that system, basic accountability on that system. Again, when we talk about DOGE, who are we talking about? We are talking about staff that serves the President of the United States, that is appointed by the President, that reports to the White House, that is part of the formal infrastructure of the federal government. That is the highest level of accountability that you can possibly have, as opposed to some career civil servant who is, up until now, been completely immune from any form of accountability. I mean, you remember when President Trump's private tax information was leaked and weaponized. Politicization at the IRS has been a huge problem. Do you remember that scandal going back? Louis Lerner at the IRS and weaponizing the tax system against small conservative nonprofits? I give you my word, John, the only thing that is happening here is restoring neutrality, ethics, accountability to the IRS to make sure at the payment level, at the systems level, that we can identify signs and warning symptoms that large-scale fraud is taking place, that unfair politicization is taking place, that unfair targeting is taking place, and that we have faith and confidence in the IRS and that no dollars are being stolen from the American people.